Okay, so it is 7:30. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Town Board of the Town of Ossining work session for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you again to Pete Connolly for providing me that awesome flag. So before we get started on our work session agenda and our special meeting also for this evening, I have a few announcements to make. First of all, did you know that this week is School Board Recognition Week? I know I speak for my town board colleagues when I say we are so grateful to the 7 volunteer members of the Ossining Board of Education, President Lisa Rudley, Vice President Greg Galiff, Melissa Banta, Catherine Crossling, Diana Lemon, Frank Schnecker, and Aaron Spring for all the work they do to ensure that all students in Ossining receive a quality and equitable education during their time in the Ossining schools. Similarly, we are grateful to the Briarcliff Manor Board of Education and their 5 members who are ensuring excellent outcomes for students in Briarcliff. President Michael Haberman, Vice President Michelle Warner, and trustees Guido Federici, Kristen Hyman, and Kenneth Tarosian. The school boards also work tirelessly to support the staffs of their respective districts, from the superintendents and principals to the teachers, teaching assistants, and all the support staff. This work has become even more challenging, but more important than ever now in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We prepared these certificates of appreciation to show the Ossining and Briarcliff school boards just how much we are grateful for their servant leadership. And we will make sure that they get into the hands of our school boards so that they know just how much we appreciate them. So I have Briarcliff Board of Education Certificate of Appreciation, and I have the Ossining Board of Education Certificate of Appreciation. Thank you guys so much. We really know how hard you work, and just again, you are volunteers, and we are so grateful for your service to our community. Next, early voting starts this Saturday, and Election Day is only 2 weeks away. I think you could probably tell from all the lawn signs. Early voting will last for 9 days, and the schedule is as follows. Saturdays, October 24th and 31st, and Sundays, October 25th and November 1st. The polls are open from noon until 5 for early voting. Monday, October 26th, Wednesday, October 28th, and Friday, October 30th, 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. Tuesday, October 27th, and Thursday, October 29th, noon until 8 p.m. Early voting will be at 17 locations throughout Westchester County, and yes, you can vote at whichever location is most convenient to you. The closest location, and only one in Ossining for those who live in the town, is the Community Center at 95 Broadway. So that's the closest one here, but if another one is closer to your place of work or where you happen to be, feel free to go and vote in person at any one of those. You can still request an absentee ballot via online application, postmark, email, or fax until October 27th, or in person at the Board of Elections office in White Plains until November 2nd. The Board of Elections will also be open extended hours starting this week and through the election to assist voters. You can drop your completed absentee ballot at any early voting location or polling place on Election Day. And there's going to be special line for people who just want to drop off an already completed absentee ballot. So you don't have to wait online with everybody else if you decide you want to do that and prefer to do that than to mail. Please be reminded that you may only vote at your designated polling place on Election Day. This location may have changed from previous years due to COVID and may have even changed since the first postcard you received in the mail from the Board of Elections a few weeks ago. We know some people have even received second postcards, and I believe you might even receive one more postcard reminder. You can check your updated polling place online, request an absentee ballot, learn all you ever wanted to know about elections and more by visiting the Board of Elections website at citizenparticipation.westchestergov.com. And And the Board of Elections can be reached via phone at 914-995-5700. We all know this is a very heated election and people are very passionate about their views. Some people feel very anxious about this, but the amount of interest in this election is a positive sign. When the public is more engaged, government is more likely to reflect the people's interest. I encourage you to visit vote411.org/ballot to research who is on your ballot. Presidential candidates are not the only ones who represent you. There are also congressional, state, and local leaders like us. The anxiety, none of us are running though this time, just so you know, except for one town judge. Anxiety people are feeling is not altogether misplaced. This year unfolded with a number of overlapping challenges, as we all know, and it would certainly be unreasonable to pretend there is no downside to the intensity of the election. For one thing, people are quickly sharing election-related information online without necessarily fact-checking first. So please consult official sources with your questions and concerns. The more pressing concern for many is the state of discourse in our country. A wonderful initiative was forwarded to me by our tax receiver, Holly Perlowitz, who will be speaking with us later tonight. After the election, candidates are supposed to collect their lawn signs back or allow you to send them back. The vinyl pieces get thrown out, and sometimes the stakes get recycled. I know that I have pretty much a garage full of stakes. But if you decide not to send your lawn sign back, you can repaint it with positive messages of love and kindness. I think this is something that maybe has already started happening in Bedford. These messages can go a long way and help show the respect and pride that we all share in our community. This Saturday, there will be yet another volunteer opportunity for those of you who love our parks and outdoor spaces, similar to those who helped over the last few weeks clean up Crawbucky, Lewis Engel, Henry Gordine, and the Sing Sing Kill. And big shout out to Riverkeeper, to Green Ossining, and to our Home Run Against Drugs kids and other volunteers who came out in force this past weekend and a few weeks back to help clean up those parks. This weekend, we need additional helping hands to protect our new stream buffers and take care of our trees at Ryder Park. Grab your gardening gloves, loppers, hand pruners, and of course, your mask. And head to Ryder Park from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. this Saturday, October 24th, to lend a hand and care for some of our new trees by cutting and detangling vines and pulling up invasives and putting up some fencing around the little trees to make sure that they can continue to grow and protect our wetlands. Social distancing guidelines will be in place, and we will be meeting up at the Ryder Park Pond just past the ball fields. Registration is recommended but not required via Ossining Recreation Community Pass. If you register in advance, you will be contacted in the event of a cancellation or if another important update needs to be shared. For example, if it rains and we decide to cancel. Right now, that's not the plan. In other news, leaf collection by our town highway department began in earnest this week and will continue until the end of the year. Leaves can be left loose at the curb or in paper bags for pickup. Considering this morning's weather, it's important to remember to keep the leaves out of the road. They can make driving conditions dangerous. In fact, if you rake the leaves to the curb and winter rain carries them too far into the road, please consider raking them back to the curb line if they haven't yet been picked up. Leaf pickup service is going to be continuing, as I mentioned, this year, and it is certainly one of our most popular across the town. It's one of the many steps that we take to be more environmentally friendly by picking up the loose leaves and or asking them to be in paper. Another, of course, that we encourage is mulching in place, which is even better for your lawn and the environment. As far as loose leaf pickup or in paper bags, though the state hasn't caught up yet, so if you live on Route 133 or Route 134, your leaves must still be bagged in plastic, unfortunately. The Ossining Community Equity Task Force will be meeting tomorrow to begin distribution of our survey. The survey will be available as a Google form in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Hard copies can be requested for you or for distribution through your business. The task force's goal with this survey is to gauge where the community feels inequities exist and where we feel resources to overcome inequity should be directed. If you feel there are no inequities in our community, tell us that too. There's plenty of space for your opinion in the survey, and it only takes a few minutes to complete. We will share the link in my supervisor's update on Friday and on our Facebook page. Please help us spread the word. And also, if you're interested in becoming part of the task force, you can email dlevenberg@townofboston.com. Lastly, of course, we need to address the elephant in the room. Coronavirus cases continue to rise in New York State and around Westchester County. The governor announced today he's considering advising against non-essential travel to our closest neighbors, Connecticut and New Jersey. We are not yet at the point where we need to panic, but as the cold weather settles in, you and your family should make a plan for the upcoming weeks. Are you taking any necessary risks you can avoid? Do you have a plan for when your child returns from college and may need to quarantine for 2 weeks? Have you decided how you want to handle Halloween and other big events? And some of this stuff, we will be sharing out more information and best practices as we get more advice from the county. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. No pun intended. Medical experts are also advising people to get flu shots to prevent a twindemic of both flu and COVID surges. We may not have a vaccine yet for COVID, but we do for the flu, and it's smart to do whatever you can to protect your health and your family's health. In fact, we are going to be offering for town and village employees this week free flu shots. New York is now offering a free COVID Alert New York app, which can notify you if you were within proximity of someone who later tested positive. The app is voluntary, anonymous, and does not use location services, GPS, or geographical information. You can learn more about the app at coronavirus.health.ny.gov/COVID-alert-NY. And that's it for my announcements. Do any of my board colleagues have any announcements of their own? And seeing none. I am very excited to introduce our guest this evening, Norma Drummond from Westchester County, who is a Westchester County Commissioner of Planning and a good friend of Town of Boston for many years. We have her here tonight to deliver an informative presentation on the county's housing needs assessment and how this data can be helpful to local governments. We have extended an invitation to our Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee to attend tonight's meeting to view this presentation as Norma presents it. Before I turn over the mic to Norma, I wanted to give her and her team a huge shout out for the incredible work they have done over the past few months on the 2020 census. Thank you, Norma, for your team's hard work and helping all of the stakeholders across the county. When the census count closed last week, the countywide response rate hit 69.2%, which was up from 67.9% in 2010. And the Town of Boston response rate broke 70%. Yay! We made it to 70.1% at the close, which was up from 69.9% in 2010. And I know that it was even more than that from 2000 census. So you've all heard me say how important the census is. We could not have achieved these numbers without the support and leadership from county planning. So thank you so much, Norma. Please take a bow before you start your presentation. And of course, if you want to talk more about all your good news about the census, please do.
Thank you, Dana, as always. Wow. Yeah, we really did well. At the end of the day, not only did the county exceed our 2010 response rate and our 2000 response rate, by the way, both in excess of 1%, but 79% of the municipalities in Westchester, 34 of the 43 municipalities, all exceeded their 2010 response rate. That was just tremendous, okay? Every single municipality exceeded the lowest response rate in 2010 as well. So even though we ended up with only 2 municipalities that did not quite hit the 60%, I'll tell you an interesting story. The lowest response community was Portchester, the hardest to count. And we actually did the analysis to see that they actually counted 800 households more in this census than they did 10 years ago, because there were actually an extra 2,000 housing units that we found different. So we had to boost up Portchester. They never expected to end up at the bottom of the pile there. But it was really, they still at the end of the day counted more, or had more households counted self-responding on their own. And it's always better to get households to self-respond. I mean, at the end of the day, 99.9% of our housing units were counted. The problem is when the Census Bureau counted them after knocking on the door 6 times and nobody answered, you don't know how many people they figured were living in that household. And so whether they accurately counted the number of residents who were there on April 1st it's questionable in our estimation. What we had heard after the last census was that places like Yonkers, their rental vacancy rate was tremendous, and likely because the Census Bureau counted units that did not respond as vacant. That doesn't help anybody. So it was always in our best interest to make sure that the self-response was as high as it possibly could, and so we did really, really well. But I'm going to take a deep breath and say I'm so happy it's over.
Of course you are. And I think you said you're actually going to get to see your husband now. So congratulations on that. Hopefully he's happy about that too.
Except that every night this week I have a meeting. So
okay,
actually,
right.
this is my second of this
housing now. So
yeah, exactly.
On to the next thing, right.
No worries. All right. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can let you see the presentation that I have prepared for you. So the county, in November of 2019, County Executive Latimer released our housing needs assessment. This wasn't the first assessment that we did. This was actually our third. Our first one was done back in 1994, and then a second one was done in 2004. They generally get done shortly after the release of census data. In this case, because so much data is available under the American Community Survey, we didn't want to wait for the census, data to come out, because a lot of that data won't be out until 2022 and 2023. It was just important for us to get a handle and a sense of what's going on in Westchester. While this is a county-wide report, this is very unique from the previous reports in that almost every single data set that's in this report is not only available at the county level, but it's available for every single municipality to see where you stand. Poverty, age of your housing stock. You can see exactly how many housing units were built in every decade, okay, essentially for the last 90 years. And you can see how you compare against other municipalities. So there's a lot of data in here. Because obviously we all didn't want to be here forever, I pulled out a couple of really important points for our discussion this evening. And you will hear me repeatedly make the link of affordable housing and economic development. Okay, and so I'm going to start right off with a quote from the County Association, Bill Cuddy was able to review the report ahead of time with us. We wanted to make sure that it made sense to people other than us, what we call ourselves, our housing junkies, just to make sure it really made sense to the average person. And so the quote that Bill gave us about the study was that the county's long and short-term economic viability is predicated on our housing inventory meeting the demands of our workforce. It's a call to action. If we don't address these issues that we identify, then we fail our families and our workers. The problem is intractable, but it isn't insurmountable. So let me jump right into the data here. And again, you're going to see on every slide where I give data, I give you Ossining Town's data. So, and this is the unincorporated area. So the village of Ossining is a different report. Okay, so your data is the specific area outside of the village there. And Briarcliff, by the way. Briarcliff gets its own data, okay? So countywide, there are 345,885 units that there are official records for. For those of you who remember when I did census presentations warning you the census was coming, I told you when we did our local update of census addresses in the summer of 2018, we were able to find 24,000 housing units. We found a total of 370,000 housing units in this county. People living in basements, over the garage, doubled up where there were 2 dishes outside, or there were 2 mailboxes outside of places. And so really there are more, but we have to work with official data that's out there. 81% of those housing units were built before lead-based paint was banned. Okay, that's an important amount, an important number. It makes the county qualify for lead grants, it makes us also more susceptible to having children with elevated blood levels, which is obviously not a good health condition. Again, whenever I can, I will interject other municipalities so you get a sense of how you compare. Yonkers has the most housing units. I don't think anybody is surprised by that, with over 82,000. And Buchanan has the fewest, with fewer than 1,000 housing units. But Ossining Town, you have 2,133 for the data that was available, 2,005 of them were occupied. Only 8.6% of your housing stock, so only 168 units have been built since the year 2000. You're actually pretty high compared to most of the other municipalities. So you've had more growth than other municipalities. 62% of the county's units are ownership. We are below the national average. We're just below, but actually many people are surprised by that. But you guys are way above the national average for ownership, okay? 87.8% of your housing stock is ownership. On the flip side, only 12.2% of your housing stock is rental. Again, the county hovers right around the national average, okay? You only had, for the data that we could find, 245 rental units. It's not a lot for a community like Ossining, for the size of Ossining. But again, linking it to economic development, we don't have enough housing in Westchester that is affordable. There are only 172,000 people who both live and work in Westchester, okay? We have almost as many people commuting into Westchester as are commuting out to New York City, to Stamford, to New Jersey, to Rockland County, to other places. That's not good. That's a lot of people who are putting a strain on our transit system, who are on the highways with us every morning because they may not be able to live and work in Westchester. Now, Westchester was always a bedroom community. People always worked in New York City, came home to the suburbs, lived in Westchester. So the number commuting out doesn't surprise us because there are so many more jobs available a hop, skip, and a jump away in New York City. But what does surprise us at this point is the number of people who are commuting in. People from the Bronx who are working in our healthcare industry, who are working in our nonprofit industry, and then people from the whole Hudson Valley, from Connecticut, Rockland, et cetera, that are just commuting in for the jobs here in Westchester. Almost 90,000 people were living in poverty in the year 2017, okay? The county's percentage grew 13.8%. Ossining Towns grew 27.4% between 2000 and 2017. So Ossining in 2017 had 419 people living in poverty, okay? An important percentage. And it may be even worse now with COVID. We don't know, but again, for the data that was available. Essentially, there are three measures for housing. There are three issues that we look at as we look at our housing issues. The first is severely overcrowded, where more than 1.5 persons live per room in a unit, not per bedroom, but per room, okay? The second is substandard units, and that's essentially places where there are no kitchens and bathrooms. And then the last is severely cost-burdened households. Those are households that are paying more than 50% of their income toward their housing costs, whether it be ownership or rental, doesn't matter. Okay, so you guys did really well on both of the first two categories. You had no overcrowded units that we could find in any data source. You had no substandard units that we could find in any data source. Meanwhile, the county had 0.7% of substandard and 1.3% of severely overcrowded. That number, by the way, of the severely overcrowded, you're going to see that again, okay? That's where families are doubled up, and so that's telling us that there's actually a shortage of housing units just based on that number. But the big number is the 72,000 households that are severely cost burdened. So more than 20% of the households living in Westchester are paying more than 50% of their income toward their housing costs. These are going to be a lot of our senior citizens who are house rich but income poor. They live on very, very fixed incomes. And so for Ossining Town, I break it out for you. You had 280 severely cost burdened households, 15.7% of you, but 275 of them were owners and only 5 were renters. Again, you don't have a lot of renters to begin with, but you do have a lot of owners who are severely cost burdened. Now, if I look at the households that are paying more than 30% of their income toward their housing costs, our 72,000 number doubles. It's over 140,000 households are paying more than 30% of their income toward their housing costs. Foreclosures has been a big issue in Westchester. And while the most foreclosures physically happened in the city of Yonkers, The impact of foreclosures was actually more severe in northern Westchester. Now, it wasn't so bad in Ossining, but your neighbors actually saw it more impactful, because we looked at the percentage of the actual number of foreclosures compared to the total number of housing units in each of our communities. And that's how we came, while Yonkers had the greatest number, it was only 2.18% of their housing units, as opposed to Peekskill, almost 5% of Peekskill's housing units have been foreclosed upon since 2008. All right, almost over 4% of Mount Vernon's housing units have been foreclosed upon, and over 3% in Yorktown, Cortland, Lewisboro, and almost 3% in North Salem. So again, this issue of foreclosures has impacted northern Westchester much more significantly than southern Westchester. So let's talk about affordability, because this is where it does get interesting. But again, Ossining's numbers are pretty good here. So the median house in Westchester is $650,000. That was December of 2018. All right, to buy that median priced house, you need an annual income of $235,000 after you've put 5% down and you pay for your closing costs. But if you earn at 80% of the area median income, that family of four only earned $93,650. That family of four has a gap of almost $400,000 to be able to buy that house at $650,000. Even a family earning 100% of income of the area median income, $117,000, still had a gap of over $325,000 to be able to afford that median sale price house. Now in Ossining, your median sale price house was $472,500. Again, in this report, every municipality gets their own data. So your house, your median price was $472,000. Your median income of the owners in your town is $123,000. You still have a gap, believe it or not. So, but let's talk about at 80% of AMI, what was a $400,000 gap for the county median price, the gap here in Ossining is only $227,000. At 100% of median, the gap is $162,000. But based on your median sale price of a house, $472,500, to be able to afford that house, again, with the 5% down in closing costs, you need an annual income of $177,000. So the typical owner here in Ossining could not afford to buy a house in Ossining today. That's what this is telling us. So even though your numbers are much more affordable on the whole, your owner income information doesn't show that your homes are still affordable. So this is the ownership side. Now we're going to look at the renter side. Countywide, the median renter's income is only $36,690. If I were to divide that by 12 months and the family only pays 30% of their income toward their rent, that family has $917 a month available to pay their rent. A two-bedroom FMR at the time that this data was all collected was at $1,687. That meant that family earning the median renter income here in Westchester had a gap of $770 every single month to be able to just live in a two-bedroom unit, at the FMR. In reality, there are only 3 municipalities that where renters can afford the rents: Newcastle, Bronxville, and Pelham Manor. Although I will tell you, last night I did the Tarrytown Village Board meeting and their gap was $3. So I really gave them credit for their renters as being awfully affordable. Here in Ossining, your median renter income is $48,400. Remember, you had very, very few units to collect data from there. So that when they spend 30% of their income over the course of 12 months, that gives them almost $900 a month for them to be able to pay rent. It still leaves a gap of $790 to just pay for the two-bedroom FMR. And if you know, the two-bedroom FMR is actually set at the 40th percentile of all apartments. So it's not even the middle of the road apartment. It's actually slightly below middle of the road. So one of my most important messages is that jobs follow the housing. There is such a connection to where employers are locating these days and their ability to house their employers. I'm actually going to go to the next slide first to show you this a little bit better graphically. Between 2010 and 2017, the entire Hudson Valley issued only 25,000 building permits. At the same time, Connecticut issued 23,000, Long Island 16,000. But look at Northern New Jersey and New York City. Northern New Jersey issued 151,000 building permits at the same time, and New York City issued 164,000. There's no question, these places have the ability to go vertical. You know, New York City can knock down a 4-story building and put in a 40-story building. Northern New Jersey doesn't have the same seeker requirements that we do have here in New York, so certainly it's a little easier to actually get development approvals in New Jersey. But the entire Hudson Valley only issued 25,000 building permits. And if you can actually see the row of them, it's actually along the I-84 corridor in Orange County and Ulster County up there. So let's go back now to the previous slide. And again, because of this recession, housing production here in Westchester has slowed. You guys have done better than most, again, since 2000. Remember, I told you that you've had over 8% of your housing units have been created during that time period. So you've actually done better than most. But what it means is that New York City is getting the jobs. You know, they're outpacing all the other areas and getting the jobs to go there, which means the young people are also going to New York City because the jobs are there, which also means that our workforce is aging. As a matter of fact, again, the report has all sorts of demographic data. There are instances in that report that show that certain municipalities have seen of their over 80 and 85 population has increased over 200%, okay? So there's no question our, you know, as a whole, our county is getting older, the people who live here, and then our workforce, because we're not attracting the jobs, we don't have the housing that's more hip for the young people, and so the young people are going to the city instead. And all in all, like I said earlier, it creates a strain on our transit system. There's so many more people on the Taconic Parkway with me every morning, you know, it's, and on 684 and everywhere else in this county as people are commuting in to work. So we can go past that. So the gross need for housing is a total of 82,000 units. But you know what? We're going to ignore this number because the greatest need for here, I showed you, was the 72,000 people who are in decent, safe, and sanitary housing. They're just having a hard time paying for it. That doesn't mean that we need to create more units. We just need to somehow figure out how to make that housing more affordable. Okay, whether it's ownership and, you know, and particularly those families that live paycheck to paycheck. If something happens, we have to have supports in place to be able to help them, like foreclosure counseling and assistance. We need to make sure we have housing rehabilitation services available, particularly lead-based paint. Remember, I told you 81% of our housing units have lead-based paint in them, or were built before lead-based paint was banned. But the most important piece of this is that the need, it's not just in Ossining, it's not just in Peekskill, it's not just in Yonkers, the need is all over Westchester. There was no community in Westchester where their ownership housing was affordable to the residents who live there now. There were only 3 communities where their rental housing was affordable to the people who live there now. So when we talk about how many new units do we need, we actually talk about a number of 11,703. And that's because, remember I told you early on, there were 4,500 severely overcrowded households, the more than 1.5 people per room. At the time the report was done, we also had 846 homeless families. And then we also, because of through our Home Seeker website, we have families, we have over 19,000 families right now who are telling us that they are actively looking for housing in Westchester. Many of them already live in Westchester, but 6,300 of them do not. And so 6,300 of them may be some portion of those 200,000 families that are commuting in every day. So we need to be able to account for the active home seekers who are telling us they're looking for housing in Westchester. And that's how we arrive at the need for 11,703 units. So what are we doing about it? In 2020, we right away, we said we need to set up a couple programs. Housing stabilization, we're actually putting $10 million available for housing stabilization this year just because of COVID. Just because we have landlords who aren't being able to collect rent and we have tenants who aren't able to pay the rent, we really have taken some of the county's coronavirus relief funds and set them aside to be able to just deal with eviction prevention. We don't want anybody losing their housing right now. But we're doing some housing training. Home ownership counseling is important, particularly for the foreclosure services that we've set aside a fund for foreclosure counseling as well. I think we have $2.5 million actually available for foreclosure assistance. So somebody who's fallen behind on their mortgage because they got impacted by COVID has the ability to get up to 4 months of mortgage payments to preserve them in their home. The county executive and the board of legislators also approved $10 million to buy land to create affordable housing units, and another $10 million for infrastructure improvements, and $500,000 for pre-development, where developers and municipalities, if they have a site that they'd like us to explore, there's funds available to be able to pay an architect to get an appraisal done, to get a topographic survey done, whatever some of the initial feasibility surveys, or information you need to collect gets done. The thing I'm most excited about, honestly, is the model ordinances that we're continuing to roll out. As many of you remember, years ago, we rolled out the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Model Ordinance. Last year, with this rollout of the report here, we rolled out an accessory dwelling units model ordinance. We are finalizing right now a senior housing model ordinance. One of the things that we found in our review was there are 12 municipalities in Westchester right now who have 15 different ordinances. So we're taking the highlights of what we find, not just here in Westchester, but in other places where it makes sense, and we're going to actually roll out a model ordinance that every municipality can consider adopting. We're then going to look at parking requirements. We're going to look at office parks and adaptive reuse of buildings, because we just realized that not every municipality has professional planners on board like you do. And so, we need to be able to give guidance and assistance to some of the smaller municipalities who just don't have those services available to them. And that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I would be happy to answer any questions. I will tell you the report itself is about an inch thick, but this is the appendix, and the appendix has a 7-page report in here for each municipality. So there is all sorts of data in here that I didn't even get to, because as I said, we would have been here for a long time if I kept going. So I really just pulled out some of the highlights just to be able to let you start your own conversation about what you guys really see as your housing need.
Norma, thank you so much. That was a great overview of a very detailed report, and we're grateful to the county for its assistance in sort of giving us the big picture and taking a look at what's happening countywide. I would like to open it up to questions to the town board, but before I do, I just wanted to ask Valerie. Valerie's on the agenda to just talk a little bit about the housing in the town, and I don't know if you wanted to do that now or if you want to wait. So I'm just going.
Sure. I mean, I can touch. It's not, my little piece was not going to be very long. I just thought it would be helpful for the public as well as the board to know where you are with the affordable housing in the town of Ossining. Basically, as you know, the town of Ossining does have an affordable housing law based upon the county's model ordinance. Right now, you actually have one development that's almost complete, and that's Parth Knowles, and they'll be providing actually 5 units of rental affordable housing to the town. And we're actually going to begin working with the developer to start on developing their marketing plans, as well as identifying the units and getting that all settled, so that once they're ready to get their certificate of occupancy, we'll be able to start getting those units online. We also have another project in front of the town, the planning board right now, which is a 10-lot subdivision. And so one of those units will actually become an affordable housing unit in the future as well. In addition, you do have an accessory apartment law on the books, and you have 30 units of accessory apartments within the town of Ossining. So the town has progressed over the years in developing more affordable housing units, and it's continuing to do so because of the current regulations you have on the books.
Right, and then I think over the last few years, I know that there are a couple, there's development, I think it's, I don't know how many, 8-lot subdivision maybe on North State Road, and then another one, Hawks Crossing, yes, that also are ownership or owner occupied single family homes, I believe. And those are also have affordable units. I think there's 2 at Hawks Crossing and or Thornton Hill, and I think 2 also on North State Road.
Yes.
3 on North State Road? 3 on North State Road. That's has been around for a little while. I think since maybe 2015, 16. So and that's when I think they were filled in 2016. So, and I'm not even 100% sure, and maybe John Hamilton, our building inspector does know that I think the senior apartments at the corner of North State and Chappaqua Road, I'm not 100% sure, but there might be some if not more than a few affordable units in that. Do you know, John? Do you happen to remember?
No, I'm sorry. I would have to look that up. That's been,
Okay.
been there for a few years now.
It's been there I know it was before my time. So I don't remember. I didn't know maybe if you did. Okay. Okay. So with that, I'd just like to open it up to the town board if they have any questions for Norma or Valerie about this report or comments.
Okay, I really appreciate the very thorough report and the fact that the county took time, and I would love to have a copy, but I'm sure it's online to preview. So now fast forward to this year, when I think our housing prices have gotten even more crazy, and I'm hearing tales of 70% vacancy rates in the city, and everybody's kids coming home and everybody coming back up here. What does that do to your thoughts?
So yeah, we are seeing, seriously, I hear a 15% vacancy rate of rental apartments in New York City at this point. We are seeing that the real estate market is extremely hot right now, which means the prices are just going up and up. Homes are getting sold in single days. And what I'm hearing is that the asking price that gets put on the home becomes the start of a bidding war, because so many people just want to escape from New York City, and they, believe it or not, they have the cash to buy these homes. So all it's going to do, it's just raising the median sale price here in the county. It's just going to make the county as a whole even more unaffordable.
Okay. So do we have any thoughts on how to mitigate that?
Well, to some extent, we can't control the private market. So, we've already gotten, since this county executive took over January of 2018, I can tell you I have over 2,000 housing units that have now gotten approvals. Some of them are under construction. Some old developments that we just could not get out of our own way to get them done, like the old West Health property, is going to be open early next year for new senior housing units. So we're looking at county properties. We're looking at every avenue to be able to work with developers and create as many affordable housing opportunities as we can.
Are there other questions from other members of the town board?
Just curious, you mentioned poverty levels have increased. What's the measure for poverty in the area? Do you know?
I'd have to go and look for what the report uses in terms of what that measure is.
Yeah.
I'll you know what I'll do? I'll email Victoria with the information and she can get it to you guys. Okay?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. I don't usually use poverty just as I use AMIs, or I use, like, for CDBG, low and moderate income numbers. I'm just not used to using a poverty income level to see what that is. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else on the town board? Okay, so we don't have a lot of others joining us, but we do have a few people from our planning board, and I think also from the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. So, hopefully if anybody wants to, and also our receiver of taxes, Holly Perlowitz, is here. And since, foreclosures was certainly part of that report, I don't know, Holly, if you had anything that you wanted to ask about or comment about. I can't wait. We can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. I think, Norma, when you talk about foreclosures, though, you're mostly talking about bank foreclosures.
Yes, but
versus-
not just. There are definitely some where the condos have foreclosed on other units, and some municipal foreclosures as well.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
data that we get is data from the county clerk's office, so it is a record of all foreclosure judgments.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have much to comment on other than, our big fear is that, yeah, it seems as though people have cash, but I think they also have worry. So they're coming out of the city to put everything that they have into buying these homes. I'm more worried as the economy really in next year or so begins to really hurt, and will these people be able to keep up with their mortgage payments? And many of them are first-time home buyers, so they have very little sense of the movie The Money Pit that we've all seen, those of us who own homes. Years ago, I remember in banking, the percentage to determine whether or not you would be approved for a loan would be in the neighborhood of 22%. Now it's well over 30. So I just think I'm worried about the future of some of these, this hot market now.
Right. Understandably, I think we all are, honestly. My husband has a construction business, and so he's amazed at the number of homes he's being called to where people bought a home sight unseen, literally in some cases, and now they're discovering they have mold issues and they've got dampness and other issues that they've got to deal with. So I'm hearing daily from him about the cases that he's seeing where people just literally bought houses because they were, they didn't want to have to fight for another one. And so they just kept going and bid on this at the house that they got sight unseen.
It is a little crazy out there. I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit from John Hamilton. I don't know, John, did you want to say anything about what you're seeing from your perspective in the town?
Well, I think that one of the things we did under your administration was to loosen up the accessory apartment law. And I think that's helping a lot. When you allowed people to use accessory buildings, it's opened up more avenues for them. And I do discuss it with them as I go into some of these places and people tell me they're having a hard time. I do mention to them, if you qualify, you can put an accessory apartment in. So I see things out there, but I don't see it as badly, I guess, as the rest of you do. When I go into these places, it's people that are just moving in. And then the people that are selling are moving into either senior facilities because they've reached my age, or they're moving to other states. So I don't see it as much of a doom and gloom as everybody else, but I'm seeing a different aspect of it.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody, again, from the town planning board that has any questions or comments for Norma or the town board? And you can raise your virtual hand if you want, or you can just speak. There's not a lot of you. Okay, and then I'm just going to open it up to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee members who are on. If there's anybody who has a question. And I'm looking and not seeing any hand raising, virtual hands, and I don't see anybody's phone number. So everybody can raise their hand if you click on the participant screen and there's a raise hand section, raise your hand, or if you can't do that, you can just unmute and start to speak. All right, so I think we have one person. Marissa Caruso, did you want to ask a question?
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. I just wanted an understanding of where the unincorporated town of Ossining needs to be in terms of number of units, to be carrying our fair share of affordable housing.
So we don't believe in an allocation plan or anything like that. So much of Westchester is already built that, or we recognize that the land that hasn't been built on, there's reasons it hasn't been built on. So I think what we're encouraging more municipalities really to consider now is redevelopment of parcels. As some of the corporate parks have shut up their campuses, how can we reuse some of those properties? I know you have a couple large parcels here, but I don't think any of those are being vacated by any means. So I think you guys are fine in that way. But there are definitely, particularly White Plains and Harrison, where along 287, those corporate parks all emptied out. And so we're encouraging them to really look at, because the buses are there and there's all sorts of transportation and services that's close by. So, you know, many of those corporate parks are being outfitted right now as providing lots of housing and lots of rental units actually to meet the demand. So yeah, there's no allocation plan. The county executive was quite anxious. He did not want to see that with this go round because he just recognizes that each municipality is going to try to do what it can.
Okay, thank you. And I guess another question would be, you know, what would the recommendation be in balancing affordability in terms of, you know, mortgages and rents versus school taxes? Because in Ossining, we're faced with overcrowding and probably needs of expansion of our schools in order to accommodate any additional development. And so how do you balance, you know, fixing one issue of making homes affordable, but then keeping the tax base on the school side affordable?
There's no question that school taxes and taxes here in Westchester County are certainly a big issue. Just understand that affordable units pay their fair share of taxes as well. They would pay a lower rate because their assessment and there's a restricted resale on those homes. But they do pay their fair share based on the value of that unit. And actually, your assessor would know, we provide updated information on any for sale units every single year so that your assessor can properly tax those units, because every year based on CPI and, you know, the consumer price index increases, every year our affordable units, ownership units, get just a little bit more value to them, and their ability to resale gets a little higher. But yeah, there's no question. Taxes is certainly an issue that, you know, we still have to struggle with here in the county.
Thank you.
Norma, in regards with the number of units, would you want to maybe just touch upon the total number of units that the study concluded that were needed, at least the minimum in Westchester County?
So again, the total number of units was 82,000 and change. Dealt with housing affordability. The real number of new units that we need is the 11,703. And we've already got quite a pipeline going, actually. As I said, I've got over 2,000 units of affordable units that have been created. But the problem is they're not all over the county, and not, you know, living in Yonkers or living in Peekskill or living in White Plains or even Harrison doesn't work for everybody. So that's why, you know, even if we create 2 or 3 units at a time, it creates an opportunity for the 2 or 3 families that actually really want to live in Ossining Town, because maybe it's close to where they work, and it would reduce their transportation costs if they could live closer to where they live, if they could live closer to where they work. So, I mean, again, that 200,000 families or people that commute into Westchester every day, if we can find and create more opportunities for those folks to live closer to where they work, imagine that, you know, the health benefits and environmental benefits associated with that.
I'm just wondering how COVID has impacted that in terms of people working, you know, doing more remote work and seeing more people working from home. Obviously, you know, we've seen reduction in transportation, although I have to say the roads were crazy crowded on Sunday. I don't know what's going on, but you know, I think that it's changed, and certainly the study was done in 2019, so this was pre-COVID and things have changed. But it would be interesting to just get an updated sense of, at some point, of, you know, the workforce and how that's shifted live work priorities and or, you know, plans or realities, I guess.
Yeah, we've been tracking every single week transportation, and, you know, again, Metro North is down like 80-something% of its normal ridership. Even the buses, most of our buses are down about 40% from where we were a year ago. So that's telling us that fewer people are relying on it, on public transportation. Some people we know, they don't want to get on public transportation. They're going to drive their own car. So that's why we're seeing more and more people on the roads right now, because they just don't want to get on public transportation. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some issues. And you know, if the numbers start to go up and businesses start having to, you know, have more people work remotely, you know, that's gonna, there's just no way right now, aside from measuring the actual ridership on public transportation, for us to know really the impacts overall of COVID just yet. It's going to be one heck of a case study when this is done.
Absolutely. Okay, is that it? Are there any other questions from our steering committee? I don't think we have anybody on from our ZBA. So with that, I would like to thank you, Norma, very much for your excellent report, and also once again for all the great work on the census. And Valerie, you didn't have anything else that you wanted to add, or there's nobody else on the board?
And I have one more question. When I know there's a big need for housing and a lot of people work here and want to be here, how do we determine when a community, like, you know, how do you know when Yonkers is full? You know, like how do you know when there's enough, or do you just keep building and building and building? I mean, is there a number that kind of exceeds the quality of life of a community, or do you just keep going and going and going?
It depends on the political will, honestly. I mean, our previous county executive had said Westchester shouldn't be more than 1 million people. I don't know where that number came from. It's not like we can't fit more than that. But the bottom line is infrastructure is going to drive it. At some point, we don't have the sewer capacity, we don't have the gas capacity, we don't have the electric capacity to be able to serve more households. And that's what we have to be very, very conscious of, is our infrastructure, and making sure that, because Westchester's got a lot of really, really old infrastructure, water and sewer, well over 100 years old. I know Ossining Village has, you know, issues with a lot of their water lines. So yeah, infrastructure at this point is probably the best measure for, you know, when are we built? You can certainly do an analysis based on your land use to say, you know, if every parcel was built out to the maximum of height restrictions that you were allowed, you know, you can determine ultimately how many people and how many housing units you would end up having in the town there. But it doesn't mean that that's what's, you know, ultimately come to.
So does this report address the amount of units that are the infrastructure of the community can support?
No, we did not go there.
Could we go there sometime?
I'm actually trying to get a study done about infrastructure, because the county's right now doing a new master plan, 2033. 33 will be the 350th anniversary of Westchester County.
Yeah.
It's only 13 years away. So we're working on a master plan related to that. And one of the pieces that we've really identified is still missing is a study of infrastructure. We've got pieces of infrastructure, you know, our different sewer capacity, you know, the plants and stuff like that. We know that capacity and what the current available use is, but overall, we just don't have a sense of all infrastructure, water capacity, things of that sort. So that's one of the studies I'm actually hoping we'll be able to do countywide, to be able to get a better sense to give the county direction in terms of where it needs to invest its resources going forward.
Right, I think that would be a really good guiding document for any community looking to see, you know, where their tilt point is.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much again. And I think that well, we heard from Valerie Monastra already about our affordable housing units in the town. Valerie, I assume you didn't want to add anything more to that. Next up, we have a discussion of the proposed legislation to allow beekeeping in the town of Ossining. And I'm going to turn it over again to our planner from Nelson Pope Voorhees, Valerie Monastra.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, and thank you, Norma. So anyway, the board held its first public hearing on the proposed legislation to allow beekeeping in the town. We have our building inspector, John Hamilton, with us this evening, and he has some specific comments on the proposed legislation. So John, maybe with the help of Council Tomadana and Valerie, you can walk us through your comments.
Okay. Did I unmute?
You did.
Okay.
You're good. Unmuted.
I took a look at the ordinance, and I did have a couple of recommendations or concerns, and I went through it on sections. For example, on section 3B is the application itself. It's written that it will go to the town clerk and then to us. That seems like a little redundant to me. We try to keep the processes as easy as we can. Normally, we just take an application ourselves rather than send it to the clerk, who then has to forward it to us, a little bit of a delay. So we were thinking it might help out if it came directly to us and cut out one step in the process. I think that we need to look at a bee expert to come on board to review applications and possibly go out on some of the complaints that I would have. I don't have any knowledge of bees. It's not part of the building inspector's training. So, you know, they say they need Langstroth type frame. I don't even know what that is. All I know is when I get stung, it hurts. I think we would need some type of a bee expert that would come in and talk with us. And then I looked a little further down and I noticed—
I'm sorry, just before you— be somewhat akin to what we currently have in the tree code, right? Where we have a tree warden that comes in and looks at issues when it's necessary.
That's correct.
Okay.
I noticed that we are allowing the beehives to be placed 25 feet from the side or rear property lines. So if we have two houses that have bees or beehives, and they put them on those 25-foot distances, so we're going to have them 50 feet theoretically apart from each other. Again, I don't know anything about bees. I don't know if two beehives being 50 feet apart is okay, or if they would fight. I really don't know. It's something that we might want to check on to make sure that we're not putting them a little too close together on that 50-foot mark if we go 25 feet from each line. On section 3B4E, we're requesting a dimensional sketch. I was wondering if we could replace that with survey. This way they show us a copy of their survey and they can put on the survey exactly where they're putting these hives. So we'll have the distances again to the property lines, and that might help out a little bit too. Excuse me. Also, I was just hoping that we could make this a may issue permit instead of a shall issue permit. I try to, whenever we do a permit, I try to switch them to may issue. I talked about it with Christy. If it's a shall issue, as long as they meet the criteria in this ordinance, we have to issue the permit. On a may issue, they can meet all of these criteria, but we may have some information on that house. There may have been 15 complaints of overgrown gardens, failure to upkeep the property, various different things. And if we see that you've got all these complaints and now you want to put bees on your property, then I would certainly go over and use my lifeline, Christy, and discuss it a little bit to see if maybe that's something we want to look at a little bit better. So I hope we would make it a may issue and not a shall issue.
We could do that if the board is agreeable to that. You know, there could be some sort of qualifying language in your reasonable opinion or something, so that it's not just completely, not that you would ever act arbitrarily, John, but, you know, just for the benefit of the code and to make sure that it withstands equal application, that we could craft some language so that there's some sort of, there has to be an extenuating circumstance.
Exactly. We would make sure if we had X number of complaints, we would say we're doing it because A, B, C, D, E, and we don't feel that this would be the proper use of the property at this time.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I looked at the area of the ordinance where if something goes wrong, I would kind of step in and do enforcement. And I have to say that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to enforce certain sections of this ordinance. Somebody calls and says that I just got stung by 10 bees. And I go out there, and I've already presented this to somebody who has bees. I said, what would you do if somebody gets stung? He goes, first thing I do is tell you to prove it was my bee. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to prove that you got stung by a specific hive's bee. And if you've got them, again, theoretically spaced 50 feet apart, then whose bee stung who, or was it one flying by? I don't know. But that section might be a little bit difficult. And certain parts of that might be better enforced if we did have the bee expert. He could go out and make certain determinations on an angry queen or an angry hive or whatever it is, might be beneficial to us. And also the last paragraph there of if the standards are not met regarding provisions, I'd like to change it from if standards are not met to any provisions of this code are not followed or found to be in violation would be considered a violation of the entire ordinance. I think it gives a little more encompassing the whole ordinance itself, so that we could really look at the whole thing if I had to do any kind of enforcement. So I was looking at that and I just had those ideas. And again, I don't even know if 50 feet is improper. I don't really know these things. And I think that if we could talk to somebody who is an expert in the field, even the section where it said that they have to have certain plantings, I'd like to have it included in there, plantings that you have to keep upkeep on during the whole time the beehive is active, because I can have somebody put them in and go, yeah, well, all right, so they died, big deal. I always like to have teeth in the law, so when I go to court, if I have to go to court, I can say you violated this ordinance because you failed to maintain this. The shrubs died, the bees went somewhere else, somebody got stung, blah, blah, blah. That's it.
All right, thank you for that detailed analysis. And I have to apologize. I think we all thought that you had a chance to look at this a little bit earlier in the process, and somehow we skipped a little step there. So thank you for taking the time to sort through this. I wanted to, I guess, just ask either Valerie or Christy, besides Christy, the comments that you had. Valerie, before we drafted this draft legislation, you had done a lot of research and had looked over a number of different ordinances similar to this in other municipalities. We also did reach out to the Village of Ossining because they had bee legislation and asked them about if they've had any complaints or if they've had any issues over the last, I don't know, maybe I'm going to say like 4 or 5 years, maybe they've had this bee legislation in place.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they have had any complaints or issues. I will say the reason that we had suggested that it go to the clerk before it goes directly to you was because the village is going through the clerk's office, and we just thought to make it easier for people who don't know if they live in the town or village, if they could at least start with the clerk and then they could get directed to the right building department. It might make it easier for people, even though, yes, they do eventually figure it out. I think that's why we had considered the clerk instead of going directly to you. But Valerie, and before, the town board has questions or whatever, did you have any comments on any of John's thoughts?
Yes. So John and Christy and I spoke last week. And so, he went through his comments then, and we suggested that he come to before the town board and raise a number of them. I think in terms of a number of the comments he made, we could easily incorporate into the proposed law. For example, does it go to the clerk's office or just go directly to the building department? I mean, the same thing as dealing with the dimensional sketch of over versus a survey. So a number of them are easily, we can easily incorporate. There's a few that I'd like to just draw your attention to. One, dealing with the bee expert and the 2 hives potentially spaced 50 feet apart. The bee expert that I have been placing some phone calls to it's the Hudson Valley Bee. I'm sorry, their exact acronym, but there's a Hudson Valley Beekeepers Association that I placed a phone call to and requested some information. And I've also been looking at some other resources, trying to find somebody locally within the Hudson Valley, because I found some other beekeeping or bee consultants, but they're like located in Vermont or located all the way up by like New Paltz. And I'm trying to find somebody that could be relatively close by, because if we are going to have this, we want to be able to identify them similar to the tree warden. So that work is still in progress at this point, because I figured that's something that the town board would want to know. Does this person exist, and do they do that type of work?
Mhm.
And then in addition, with the 50 feet apart, I have talked to Fernando Gonzalez. I have looked at the other ordinances, but I am looking again to speak to somebody with a little bit more and additional, points of view on the 50 feet to see if we do need to increase that, or we have to say, we have to put limitations on that, 2 neighbors cannot have beekeeping. So I'll get back to you on that. So those are the 2 items that are still sort of outstanding that I still need to deal with. And I think the last one is in terms of some of the things that John raised, which is, I think there's going to be a lot of gray area, especially a little bit with the enforcement, as opposed to just, very black and white, because like he said, it's hard to identify the bees. But again, I will be, as part of my conversations with the, hopefully the bee expert, I'll be able to get a little bit more information as to maybe some other enforcement. But I do know that the language that we used is similar language used in other communities with beekeeping legislation.
Right.
Val, you might want to talk, give me a call tomorrow. One of our planning board members indicated that he knew people who had bees, and that I thought he said that there was some type of an organization. I'll lead you over to him, and you can maybe reach out and talk to him.
Sure.
I don't want to keep you too busy.
Yes, and I know that one organization came from the Environmental Advisory Council that sent that over, and that's who I started with, and I started looking at their resources and their, and their links were, like I said, a number of them went to out of state, but I have placed contact with them, and I'm waiting to hear back from that organization.
Yeah, I'm in school tomorrow, so just give me a call on my cell and I'll give you some info.
Okay.
All right. I hope it's remote school, John, is it? Or are you doing hybrid?
No, it's all remote. I just did 17 hours over the last 2 days. I got another 8 hours tomorrow.
All right, good. As long as you keep up with school, that's all we care about.
Well, interestingly, we're actually just had a class today on battery storage facilities. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's coming up soon too.
Very soon, absolutely. Okay, so I guess just for the town board, do you want to just wait till we get some more information from Valerie about these issues? Because it sounds to me like those are the most important, which would be having a resource that we could tap and working that into the local law so that we know that, again, I think that the idea was that whoever is the beekeeper would have to, would have to cover the cost for that expert to come in versus us having to pay for that. And again, that's similar to the tree warden, right? Where we charge, I think, $50 or something for the tree warden to come in. So I think that's what we would be interested in. And then the setbacks, with 2 properties with bees right next to each other in close proximity. And then as far as the clerk versus the building department, again, let's just think if anybody has an opinion about that, share. I'm happy again for it to go right to you, to the building department. I'm just curious if it might make, if you want to consolidate and just have the one stop to start, the one start shop. So the one stop shop. Okay, whatever. Sorry, just a thought. Well, we can go back and revisit that, and it's really not, again, whatever we think is the easiest. And streamline. And if it's easier to come to you first, then that's fine.
I had a question, Dana. Can we use wording that was similar to what we did for the accessory apartments, where you can't have like the whole block having accessory apartments, and use something similar for bees? So it would be, I don't remember what the wording was, but I know there was limits to how many accessory apartments could be in a certain area.
Yeah,
Could we use kind of a similar wording?
Yeah, we can't have accessory apartments within 500 feet of one another. That's in the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something like that for the bees, so there wouldn't be back-to-back bees. Just a thought.
Yep, I think it's a good idea. Again, let's just, I just bounce to Valerie in terms of what she finds, if there's, if there's problems, if there's like the bee, whatever, the gang, B gangs or something like that, and they start fighting, and I don't know, like, you know, we need to know if that's something that's real or not real. I mean, I don't want to create something if it's not a thing. So let's try to do a little bit more research with our beekeeping experts, and then we can see if in fact they're all fighting over, you know, the same delicious plants on Donna Sharrett's property. Hi, Donna, are you still on? Or if they're, you know, content to be in their own apple orchards, or their own whatever, elderberry bushes or whatever else they're feeding off of on the property where they are. But we know that doesn't happen. They go every place and then they come back. Is this a problem? As long as there is enough on the property to make sure that they have their food and their water. So if we can do that before we make the decision, Jackie, to go in that direction, I think that would be good. Before we add limits and you know, into something that we don't know we need, let's find out if we need the limits, and then we can put those in there, I think, right? And we can, again, we can always change it if we find that it's a problem. It's always, you know, we can always change the law if we find that it's a problem. Does that make sense? Are you good with that?
Like you'll see in 2 minutes.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say that, but you 100%. So anything else from town board on beekeeping? Councilwoman Feldman, are you sure? Okie doke. All right, so next up, we are continuing our of land use permits. Basically, we are talking about allowing eating and drinking establishments who have been issued temporary outdoor dining permits to have tents and heaters. We set a public hearing for our next legislative session to consider allowing tents and heaters for outdoor dining. As we get into the winter months, this change would undoubtedly be helpful to our local businesses and ensuring a safer environment for their patrons. And we had originally drafted this original legislation. We were like very specific. No, we want this to be outdoor dining only, outdoor dining, no flaps on the sides of the tents, no heaters. But now that we see that it's sort of indoor dining outdoors and expanding the space and allowing the restaurants to essentially expand their indoor space, we're thinking maybe what would be better for our businesses, and we're starting to see this in other municipalities, is if we did allow that, as long as our building inspector was on board and the fire codes were met, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have Councilor Donna here. Maybe you want us to walk us through the draft, and our building inspector, who has also, I think, weighed in already a little bit on this. And Valerie, if you want to comment too, feel free. So we have our 3 people in the house that we need. So I'm going to just turn it over to Christy. Do you have anything?
Okay. Do you want me to share my screen so we can look at it? It's not a ton.
No, it's pretty small. So
yeah. So yeah, while I'm doing this, just by way of background, over the summer, the board looked at this and ultimately adopted local law number 1 of 2020, which established the temporary outdoor dining permit process in the unincorporated, which recognized that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, restaurants were forced to operate at considerably reduced capacities. And in order to allow them to provide safe dining experiences for their clientele while also having a level of business to allow them to continue to be viable, this temporary permit was created, which has to be renewed by the building inspector regularly. And it can only allow, this is significant, the occupancy up to what would have been permitted indoors had it not been for these restrictions due to COVID-19. And while the permitting process does contemplate allowing this permit to be used in other extenuating circumstances where the entirety of the indoor space of the restaurant establishment cannot be used, it was done with the primary intention of COVID-19 and trying to keep these restaurants in business during that time. So as the supervisor said, it was adopted over the summer in August, and it did provide that there could be no enclosed tents and no heaters. But now seeing, with the ever-changing, rapidly changing world that we're living in, seeing what's happening in other municipalities and how they are adapting, and with the guidance of the building inspector, John Hamilton, who I can obviously speak to this better than I can, but we did have a conversation and believes that if this is done in compliance with the Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and all of those requirements, that it would be a safe environment. The board decided to consider amending this code to allow for tents that can be enclosed and with heaters under certain circumstances. So what I drafted, and again, this was just to get the board rolling and to have something, the ball rolling, excuse me, and to have something in front of the board for you to start looking at. I just proposed to amend one section of the code, which is Chapter 136, Section 1, subsection C. And it just basically says you can have an open air tent without sides or flaps to provide over the outdoor seating, but, and this is the part that it's in bold and underlined, when the building inspector reasonably believes it is appropriate and necessary based upon information provided by the applicant, the building inspector may, in his discretion, allow the establishment to have a tent that is enclosed with sides or flaps and heating devices, provided the heating devices are portable and comply with all applicable safety regulations, including but not limited to the Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code. So basically it leaves the discretion to the building inspector to determine if it's appropriate. If they're already operating at 100% capacity, or it seems like it's not necessary under those circumstances, it gives John the discretion to kind of look at the circumstances and also ask for information from the applicant to determine if it's appropriate. So that was really all I had.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. I'm just going to ask John Hamilton, our building inspector, if you wanted to say anything. I think Councilwoman Feldman was particularly concerned about safety, as we all are, of course, but she had brought that up and wanted to have you weigh in. So maybe you can weigh in.
Yeah. I was over in Briarcliff Manor at 10510. And I noticed he already had the tents with the flaps that he used during the summer. And I believe Newcastle as well. And I think pretty much most of the municipalities are going in that direction. I've spoken to a couple of the restaurant owners in the town, and they can't survive if we don't allow this. Obviously there can't be outdoor dining when the temperature is 10 degrees out with just a roof on and nothing else. Now, it's not uncommon to have these. The tents themselves are made to be fire resistant. They would have to show to me that they have adequate ventilation, adequate exiting capacity and requirements, and also some type of fire extinguishers there as well. They'd have to show me a layout of it. And as Christy wrote in here, they have to show us why it's necessary. If this pandemic is going to continue through the winter, and it kind of looks like it is, this would make total sense. If the governor removes the restrictions, then I would see absolutely no reason for them to have outdoor dining. But they're only allowed, I believe it's 50% indoors now, and they can't exceed 100% total, so they can put 50% capacity outside, keeping in mind that they have to maintain the social distancing as well. So none of them are getting 100% capacity. And I think if we don't allow this, the people are going to go to the other municipalities, and these businesses may face real financial disaster. And I think we can do it quite safely when they supply the information, and we make sure that it is safe before we grant the permit.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd just like to open it up to the town board for discussion.
John, is there any concern about carbon monoxide being produced from these heaters being in an enclosed tent?
Well, that's one of the things I'd be talking with them about, Liz. That's exactly right, because they're using propane heaters, which would produce carbon monoxide. So they have to show me that they can adequately vent this so that we don't have a carbon monoxide buildup. So that is one of the factors that we have to take into consideration. Absolutely right.
Okay, could they like have a carbon monoxide detector out there with them, or I mean, something of that sort? That's my main concern.
Yeah, it's something that I understand what you're saying about the carbon monoxide detector. I have to look into that a little bit deeper because if the flaps are opening and closing, the wind is going to blow and it may not exactly go off if there was a problem. So I am looking into that with the state code to see what the state code recommends regarding outdoor tents with carbon monoxide detectors.
Okay, yeah, that was my main concern.
All
I
right.
just want to note, I did see in New York City, I think they've limited where you can have electric heaters versus propane heaters. So I don't know if perhaps that's something the board may want to consider, or John, you might have some information about, if you have a tent and heater, you can only use electric heaters. If you just have heaters, you can use propane heaters. I think in the city, it has to do with if you're close to the road versus on the sidewalk or something. So just
Yeah.
know
Yeah, I'm not sure about electric heaters because if you're going to put electric heaters out there, you're probably going to have to wire up a whole new circuit because these heaters take a lot of power. And obviously, if you've got them in a tent, you're going to need quite a few of them to heat this up adequately because as the flap opens and closes, the air comes in and they have to start heating again. We were in that one and they fired up that heater and I had to tell them to shut it, the propane heater, because it was so hot. It generates a lot of heat, the propane heaters. And I think they'd probably be better than electric because I am concerned with the electric. You're going to have a trip hazard with the wires. There's going to be water out there if somebody spills it onto the heaters. And I'm just concerned that we're going to overheat the circuits and start tripping them. And next thing you know, we have potential for a problem.
And so none of them are on batteries. That's not a thing.
No,
I ask because I feel like I've seen ones that don't look like they're propane and don't look like they're plugged into anything. So I just feel like I've seen that, and I don't know. Maybe it is propane, but like it doesn't make a lot of noise. It doesn't seem like it's propane, and it's producing some like heat, like a low grade, electric heater, but. I don't know.
You might be referring to those radiant type heaters that they have in the like Home Depot. When you walk in, you get that blast of hot air. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I mean they look more like almost like a light fixture or something like that. But I think they're electric. I don't know. I just feel like I've seen ones, but maybe I just haven't seen them on or something. Maybe they are propane and they're just standing there waiting to be used.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I think in New York City, they're saying electric heaters are the ones that have to be closer to the road, the propane heaters closer to the building, which I don't know if that's really intuitive, but I don't know, it's just something maybe we could do some research on and see why that's there.
Anybody else on the board? Questions or comments? Or generally, I feel like the board is generally, if we can do this safely in favor of this, would you say that's a yes? Can you shake your head in the yes direction if you think this is something we're going to want to do? Okay, I think so. Councilman Wilcher, are you shaking your head in any direction?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we will continue to just tweak this a little bit. I don't think it needs a lot of tweaking, or I think more than anything, just want to make sure that that we are all good with safety. And if we are, then we will have this on for our next public hearing.
Then public hearing is being noticed for next week.
Right.
But the board can certainly leave it open if there's still a need for additional information or based upon the comments we may get from the public.
Absolutely.
And I think the way Christy wrote it, there's nothing in there that says what type of heaters. So the board can continue along, and then if there's anything with heaters that we come up with, we can just direct them what we want them to do.
Okay.
John, the one thing I did put in there, and I don't know if you picked up on it or had any thoughts on it, I put that it had to be portable because I didn't think that the intent was to have them to start putting in fixtures, but I don't know if that's really applicable or if that's a restriction that you think is appropriate.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. I think it's a great idea. All the ones that I've seen are the portable units. I would not be in favor of fixed units that are going to generate too much heat in one spot. And I think that we could get a problem from that. So I like the idea of them being portable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I think that we are saying thank you to John and to Valerie. Is that correct? I believe so. Yes. Thank you guys very, very much. And up next, we have one departmental report from our wonderful receiver of taxes, Ms. Holly Perlowitz. So thank you so much, Holly, for your patience tonight. We look forward to hearing your report, and you're on.
Thank you. I'm really trying not to take it personal that everybody left.
Aw.
I mean, I find affordable housing and bees very fascinating, but I also find taxes very fascinating too. All right, Victoria, I don't know if you're able to share the screen. I would appreciate it. So the last time I was here was in August, which was just right at the time that I sent out the school tax bills. So I'm here to update you on, we've now gone through the 2 warrants that we have in any given year, the town and county warrant and then the school and library warrant. So you can see by this, and I tried to focus you on the town and county. We've now collected 98.8% of the warrant, which is really outstanding. The first half of school was due by September 30th, and we've already collected 98.2% of the first half, and have also collected some amount of the second half as well. And I just sent out the delinquent letters on Friday, so I'm likely to get a number of people who just forget to pay their taxes, and usually the delinquent letters, is a good reminder of that. And my antidote to that is always to get them to sign up for the electronic reminders that I send out, which have really get amazing results, and people are always, I get many emails thanking me for reminding them. So that's a wonderful way. And honestly,
how do you sign up for that while you're, you might as well give a quick ad.
Yeah. Okay. So you sign up for it on the town's website. Go to my page, the tax receivers page, and you can sign up for it right there. And townofaustining.com, www.townofaustining.com, and receivers page. So I just to give you some perspective, the number of people who are delinquent as of today are 244 parcels, and that amounts to less than 2% of our parcels, which are 10,176. So again, I know I sounded a little down about the future, but I am enormously happy with these results. That I was worried about the school taxes, and yet people paid. I can tell you that our taxpayers were wonderful and grateful, and appreciated that we made as many ways for them to pay. They could pay online. The online usage was up. We had that dedicated slot in the post office. They could pay at any other post office. They could come in. We were accepting payments in the lobby from 9 to 2:30. I heard a lot of input from our taxpayers, particularly those who have friends outside of Ossining, that a lot of other municipalities were not permitting that. So they were very grateful and felt safe when they walked into our lobby because of the protocols that we had in place. So it worked out well, and frankly, I think people were happy to just see each other and be a part of the municipality in that regard. So that's the really good news, that we have really good collection rates on both of the warrants that are out now. So moving now down to the middle of the page where we have the delinquent tax liens. So we have currently 2,339,205 in tax liens, which equates to 195 parcels. It also equates to 4% of our outstanding tax receivables, which frankly is, from what I hear from other municipalities, that is good. But of course, for us, it's something we always strive to improve. So I wanted to sort of break down that amount. So if you look a little bit further down, included in that $2.3 million is payment plans, and we have 14 parcels, 11 taxpayers, because one of the taxpayers has 4 parcels. So that's these are payment plans that have been approved by the town board and enable our taxpayers who can, who have come to us and requested a payment plan to pay their taxes, their tax liens off in a period of 2 years. And so that's a chunk of it. There's $129,000 in liens which relate to 2 properties where those are 2 properties that we can go ahead and foreclose on. And I am telling you that we're working with a online auctioneer that the town has used before for equipment auctions. So you'll be getting some further news about that in the coming weeks. Normally we would have done it in person, but there's absolutely no way to do that now. So we are going to do it via this online auction. It's new to us, so we're going to have to make sure that we have all the correct notifications in place. And Victoria and I actually have done some talking to this group, and they seem to do this all the time, particularly in the upstate counties where there's there's a lot of distance between spread out homes, so they do it online. So I'll keep you posted on that. Additionally, we have 5 commercial properties that make up about 47% of the delinquent tax liens. And those are the same that I've mentioned to you before, and I've listed them here. The Research Center on Natural Conservation. I can tell you what I know about that. I know that it drastically affects the Village of Briarcliff as well. And they're the Village of Briarcliff's legal counsel is trying to pursue some sort of a meaningful contact there so that we can determine next steps for both the Village of Briarcliff and the town. But they're really taking the lead in trying to make some contact. The truth of the matter is that the laws are such that right now what they have outstanding, and you can see that $550,000 is just really 2020 liens. So it will be 2 years before they're actually pushed and puts us in a position to be able to foreclose on them. But in the interim, obviously, we've had to make the towns and schools whole along the way. So that's a real hardship for us. The village, of course, is experiencing it from their own perspective as well, as we are for certainly the town portion of it. Ossining Land, what I know about that is that this month we're coming up against a deadline I've been told that they've been given by their lender, who they owe about $12 million to, and they've been given until the end of October to pay, or the lender is supposedly going to foreclose on them and sell the property. That's the one that's located on State Street and James Street. It's actually two streets. So I'm hoping that if that occurs, that there'll be a sale and then we'll get paid off that way. So I'll keep you posted on that and see what happens at the end of October. Of course, it'll probably take some time for that to wash through the system. JLD Properties is down on Snowden, and I'm in touch with him monthly. He is paying just slowly, and because we're not allowed to take partial payments unless you're involved in a payment plan, which he has not requested, he sort of stockpiles money and then pays off as he can. But he's communicating with me, and I know that his intentions are good. Paradise Heating Oil, which is on Westerly Road, we can't get anyone to return phone calls to us. So I really don't know much about what's going on with that. Again, it's a 2020 lien, so they know the rules, and they know that we can't do much for another 2 years. Red Lion Apartments, which is on State Street, is managed by an outfit in Richmond Hills, and they randomly sent in late a payment for their first half of school. So of course I couldn't accept it because they sent it in without the penalty. So I sent it back to them. There was no indication on the check. It came through, like a bank. It was a bank check. So there's no way of there was nothing there for me to, hold on to. So I did write them back when I had to send back the check, which of course killed me to do, but I had to. I sent them back a note reminding them of these other outstandings. So, to think that between payment plans, the 2 properties that are going to go into foreclosure, and these 5 commercial properties, that's about 60% of the delinquent taxes that we sort of have our arms around. The rest are people that slowly pay off, and they get notified about it, and they pay. I look for on a monthly basis, and I think it's something that I say in my monthly updates to the supervisor, that I just look for every category to always be showing some sort of payment, because people know that they have these, they're reminded about them, and they're paying when they can. So I guess the takeaways that I'd like you to walk away with are that the school collection went really well. Both warrants are in really good shape in terms of the percent of collections. And the thorns we have are these 5 commercial properties that, I'm monitoring and doing what we can, which is mostly just notifying them of their delinquencies. So with that,
Okay, thank you so much.
anything else?
And I will just again open it up to questions from the town board. Any questions for the receiver? We always
Thank you, Holly, for your report.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were speaking.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank Holly for her report, and just thank you for being thorough. And I have a couple questions about foreclosures, but I'm going to call you with them because they're a little more complicated than I want to get into at this point. So thank you.
Call me whenever you can.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. And I just want to say that we get so many comments about how people like to deal with our tax receiver's office. And, it's not an easy job to collect taxes. People, as much as we know that they do good and they pay for all of our municipal services, our school district, a lot of the things that we don't like to talk about or see, or sewer systems, etc. So much of that's what our taxes are going for, and all the work that we do here on the town board is really paid for by our taxpayers, and we're so grateful to our taxpayers for doing that. But we know that it's so hard, and we thank Holly and her team for always putting the customers first, putting our constituents first, putting our homeowners and our residents first. You only have nice things to say about our taxpayers on a regular basis, except for some of these commercial property taxpayers who are dragging their feet on paying their taxes and making it difficult for us to do what we want to continue to be able to do. But other than that, and even though they are nice people on the other end, sometimes they aren't able to come up with the money, which puts us all in a bad situation. So I want to thank you from the supervisor's office for all that you do for our constituents.
Thank you. Thanks.
And is there anything else for Holly? Otherwise, I'm going to let you off the hook. And of course, I know you're going to stay to the bitter end if you want to.
Of course.
You can.
I am.
And next up, we have actually very interesting. We received a notice recently from actually from Phillips Little and also the State of New York Executive Department Office of General Services. We received a notice of petition regarding the Champlain Hudson Power Express project. Some of you may have heard of the Champlain Hudson. I think it was originally a gas line, but it's changed. I don't know if it's the same group, but it's now a Power Express project. And it's basically a conduit that's slated to be constructed partially underwater along the Hudson to bring what they're calling renewable energy from Canada to the New York City area. A portion of the conduit would be constructed in the area of town-owned property along the Hudson River waterfront. Councilwoman Feldman has done a lot of research on this project, and she has good ties into the boating community, which of course is impacted by anything that happens on the Hudson. And based on some of her information and her research, it seems that this project has the potential to do more harm than good, not only to our environment, but also to our waterways, and making it more difficult for not only recreational boaters, but all sorts of boating activity. Also, it would imperil local wind and solar projects that would that are already in place and are probably going to be able to meet the power needs for our area. And the negative impacts to natural resources across the state are great with this project, we believe, including to our beloved Hudson and lands north through Canada. We think that those negative impacts would outweigh the benefits. So we did circulate earlier today to the town board a draft of a letter which was crafted originally by Councilwoman Feldman and then adopted a little bit by our wonderful Victoria Caffarelli, and then Council Tomadana took a look at it, and she spun her very lovely legalese into into the letter. So we now have a really great draft of a letter, which, by the way, I did also share today with the draft with Phil Zegarelli, who is the chair of the Historic Hudson River Towns and has taken a great deal of interest in anything along the Hudson. We, as a group of river towns, are always concerned with any activity. So we sent the copy of the petition, which I don't know that Briarcliff had received, as well as a copy of the draft of our letter, so that we can also talk among ourselves from the HHRT group and see if that group can also send a letter. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilwoman Feldman so you can add a little bit more detail and then open it up to the board for discussion.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, so as Dana said, the Champlain Hudson Power Express project is a 330-mile long proposed, well, it's two 6-inch diameter, 1,000 megawatt power lines and a fiber optic cable that are proposed to run from Lake Champlain in both a land and water route all the way down the Hudson to New York City. Now, we understand that when Indian Point first announced its closing years ago, there was a presumed need for more renewable energy to be brought into the New York City area. And this project was proposed to meet that need. But at this point, our understanding from Riverkeeper is that the green energy needs of New York City can be met or exceeded by the completion of already proposed local wind and solar projects. These projects not only bring more easily accessible green energy to our area, but jobs and revenue as well. Riverkeeper does not support the Chippy project because
Chippy. That's what it's called.
yeah, the trades guys are calling it Chippy.
Okay.
The barge guys and they're calling it Chippy. I don't know if it's a slur toward them or not, but that's what they're calling it.
CHPEP. Okay.
Right. So not only is Riverkeep not supported because we're able to meet the goals locally, but this Canadian company would have to build more hydroelectric dams to meet the needs that they're promising, which interferes with not only fish migration, it would also have to flood over 1,000 acres of Canadian Indian land up in the Canadian area. It would also interfere with the breeding grounds of the endangered Atlantic bottlenose sturgeon, and there are concerns about the magnetic field from the 1,000 megawatt wires that would interfere with the fish migration patterns. According to Ian Corcoran of the Hudson River Pilots Association, Ossining already has a challenging channel to navigate as it turns sharply from Scarborough to get around Croton Point, a well-known hazard in the Hudson. An oil barge running aground in this area could be an ecological disaster. We don't want the ships to have less maneuvering room or fewer options for emergency anchoring. Also, placing a hazard to these emergency maneuverings into the channel and then holding the shipping company liable to the tune of tens of millions of dollars should they damage it, they feel is not only ridiculous, but potentially could make the captain choose to run aground rather than fouling in the high voltage cable. An oil spill in the Hudson obviously would be ecologically and financially devastating for all of our communities. Eric Johansson from the Tug and Barge Association has informed me that there are about 150 places where some sort of line, transmission line, or pipeline crosses across the Hudson River, under the Hudson. In these places, the cable would need to be raised to much shallower depths than the proposed 6 feet, which they already feel is inadequate. And they feel that to go over this existing infrastructure would be even a greater hazard. Their recommendation is for the line to be buried at a 15-foot depth, which is something the company has said they cannot do. They are particularly concerned about the rocky areas where the cable can't be buried at all and instead would be covered with concrete mats. The captains feel that not only would their anchors go right through the mats to the cable, but the mats themselves could foul an anchor, potentially allow a ship to run aground. This project raises many concerns, including stirring up contaminants and PCBs during construction, interference with the fish migration and habitat, interference with ship compass navigation due to the magnetic field produced from such high voltage transmission, interference with emergency anchoring of large vessels, inability to dredge after placement, inability of the line to be buried in all areas of the Hudson, and the refusal of the company to indemnify the vessel should an incident occur, and more. Research indicates the useful life of these cables is approximately 40 years. And the company indicates they have no intention of removing them afterward. They intend to just leave them in a riverbed forever, which is not okay. More interesting facts is that the federally managed areas are not allowing them to place the cable in those waterways, and the Havistraw Bay has argued and become exempt because of ecological reasons, but somehow our area is not. There does not seem to be a reason cables can't run, these, lines can't run through our area on shore alongside the railroad tracks where they can easily be maintained and removed when they are obsolete. Ossining already has very limited access. If anything, let them use that right of way. It's time we stopped using the Hudson River as a dumping ground and treat it like the amazing natural resource that it is. I know as a board, we've tried hard to work toward greener, more environmentally friendly community with our solar codes, food scrap programs, electric car purchases, and more. So often we look at ecological disasters and wonder who let it get this way. This is one of those rare moments where we get to stand up and say, no, we don't want this in our river. And as an aside, a 2-week response time to something of this magnitude is just ridiculous in my mind. So we don't really have a full time to evaluate all the impacts it will have on our waterways and our property. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you. And it was like a research paper in and of itself, I think. So thank you so much for doing all that hard work and for getting all the input from your various resources that you are, in touch with through the voting community and also through Riverkeeper. The draft of the letter is sort of a culmination of a bunch of the points that Councilwoman Feldman made, including it has reference to the shortened time period that's less than what we were supposed to get and is inadequate in and of itself, not to mention all of the other the economic impact, the environmental impact, et cetera. So I think that I agree with you, Councilwoman Feldman, that we should take a stand on this. I think it's always tricky when we're looking at trying to balance, how we get needed power and also protecting our natural resources. But it does seem as if there are a lot of pieces already in play to make sure that we have that power in place. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment, but I'll open it up to the board for comments.
Thanks for putting in the work list. It's very thorough.
And I don't know, Councilman Meyer, do you have any, I know we talked about this a little bit prior when we got the letter. If you had any other thoughts coming from Steve?
No, conceptually, I think it's great. I'll probably have to abstain from being on the letter just because it's going to the state. But conceptually, I think it's very thorough, and I agree with it. So thank you, Councilwoman Feldman.
Okay.
You know it's dear to my heart.
Councilman Wiltshire?
I just wanted to thank Liz for her work, for what she did. But of course, she could have done a little bit more, but
Give me another 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but I
2 more weeks.
I think you did a pretty good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really, you really did, and it's a great jumping off point again for HHRT. I think I know Rich Slingerland has been taking the lead on some of these issues relating to boating as the village manager in Tarrytown, and I think that he's already on it. So hopefully we'll be able to draft something from HHRT as well, and we'll take Greg's name off of the letter. I think if everybody's in favor, it's not something that we actually have to vote on by resolution to send this letter. I don't believe we can send this letter out tomorrow. Is that correct, Council Tomadana? Yes.
Yeah, you're just sending a letter.
Right. Okay, fantastic.
I think Green Ossining might want to take a look at it and possibly sign on as well.
I think that they would have their own letter, so that
They
would
have their own
be fine.
letter. Okay.
So,
or
yeah,
send
so
them.
this is something that the town received specific notice of as a property owner. The fact that you have other environmental communities in the area, it's certainly relevant. But I would recommend that the town board, as the entity that received the letter, be the one that send this particular one.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did Briarcliff say if they received a letter?
I don't think that they did. I look again. I skimmed really quickly my emails earlier tonight, and I did see that Phil had responded to me, but I don't know if he actually responded to that question, which is, did Briarcliff receive a letter? But if I find it, I'll let you know.
I think it was based upon proximity to the river and ownership of property in that area. So I don't know that they necessarily would have.
Yeah, and he didn't respond to me about that. Just
Okay.
The email. The other thing is, I think, and just Christy, this is for you, is I feel like I didn't scan the cover letter, which was from, I think from,
Not sure what that means.
well, there was a law firm that sent a letter, and I don't think I sent that to you originally, and I think they're the ones who sent it to us. I don't know if it matters, but they said to contact this person, Josh Bagnato.
Didn't Garrett already do that?
Gareth did. Yeah, Gareth did. But I just didn't know if we wanted to send a copy to him if he was on that. I don't know if they're on that. So I'll just make sure that we get that tomorrow. Just Victoria and I can, just address.
I mean, I don't think it would hurt to copy them. I think the notice did specifically say who to address comments to.
Right.
That's who the
Yeah.
letter was addressed to.
the Commissioner of General Services.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty then. So thank you for that. And I think then I would like a motion to adjourn to our special meeting if I could.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Great. Thank you. Okay, so we have a few items on our special meeting. And they are as follows. We're going to start with our roll call, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, I think we lost Councilmember Meyer. Councilmember Feldman,
Present.
Councilmember Shaw,
Present.
Councilmember Meyer. I think we lost him. Councilmember Wiltshire,
Present.
and Supervisor Levenberg.
Here I am.
Okay. So the first resolution is proposal GASB 7475 actuarial valuation services. Resolved that the town board of the town of Ossining accepts the proposal by USI Consulting Group, Glastonbury, Connecticut, dated March 2020 for GASB 7475 actuarial valuation services for fiscal years 2020 and 2021 in the amount of $5,500, and be it further resolved that additional projects, including estimates of effects of plan changes, will be billed at an hourly rate of $320.
Okay, Councilman Meyer has now joined us again. We just missed our roll call, Greg. So, okay. So do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, one of you guys. And then that sounds good. So basically we have been working with USI Consulting Group for many years for the completion of our General Accounting Standards Board, which is GASB reporting, which is quite complicated and technical. So we're very grateful for their support annually. These reports are mandatory and they help the town forecast the landscape of our financial liabilities. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay.
Proposal comprehensive plan project website. Resolved that the town board of the town of Ossining accepts the proposal by WXY Architecture and Urban Design, New York, dated September 29th, 2020, for the development of a comprehensive, not compressive, so we'll have to edit this, plan project website in the amount of $6,000 plus domain and hosting fees.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So we're well underway on our comprehensive plan. So please, everybody, save the date for our first public meeting on November 19th. We need to get a dedicated web page set up for outreach and the posting of draft chapters and interim reports and data. Our consultant for the comp plan, WXY Studios, has agreed to create and manage the site, which will hopefully streamline the process. Do I have a vote? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you.
Resolution changing date of work session to November 5th, 2020. Whereas the town board normally holds its work sessions on the first and third Tuesday of the month, and whereas the first Tuesday of November, November 3rd, 2020 is election day, when town offices are closed and town facilities are used for election related matters, and whereas at the town board's organizational meeting, it changed the date of this work session to Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, and whereas it has come to the town board's attention that the town of Ossining planning boards and the village of Ossining board of trustees regular meetings are on Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, and as a result, there is a conflict, with town staff and consultants that attend/facilitate those meetings, and now therefore be it resolved, the town board hereby reschedules its work session for the first week of November to Thursday, November 5th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m., and be it further resolved, the town clerk is hereby directed to notice said work session as required by law.
Have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
I'll take one of those as a move and another as a second. Okay, so as mentioned in the resolution, our next scheduled work session was originally Wednesday, November 4th, because of Tuesday, November 3rd being election day and town offices being closed. But unfortunately, we overbooked ourselves, and the planning board is also scheduled to meet that same day, not to mention the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees meeting scheduled for the same day. Some of our consultants need to be at both the planning board and town board meetings, and even with Zoom, they can't be in two places at once. I've tried it. I can't double Zoom. It's impossible. So we are moving our meeting to Thursday to accommodate all of these schedules, and we will notice the meeting accordingly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Fantastic. Thank you. So with that, might I have a motion to adjourn to executive session for personnel, advice of counsel, and contracts?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Wonderful. We'll be back next Tuesday, October 27th for a legislative session meeting via Zoom. I think we have a couple of public hearings scheduled. The Zoom links to watch our board meetings are posted each Friday with the password and the meeting ID. As a reminder, you can always view past board meetings on the Town of Ossining YouTube page or our Facebook page. Don't forget to start voting. I've already been getting those people who dropped off their absentee ballots at the Board of Elections. I voted stickers people have started to post, and you can start voting in person October 24th right here at our community center. And please don't forget to do so. And have a wonderful night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.